I am Joshua, 32, and my own parents and brother uninvited me from our family Christmas party because I didn't fit their high-class aesthetic. Before I tell you about how I legally dismantled their entire fake empire on Christmas Eve, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The notification sound on my phone felt like a physical blow to my head. My skull was already pounding with the rhythm of a jackhammer. I was lying in the fetal position on my living room sofa. A fortress of used tissues, empty tea mugs, and a bottle of prescription painkillers surrounded me. 3 days ago, I had an emergency appendectomy. It was not a smooth procedure. There were complications. A minor infection set in, and the recovery time felt like it was dragging on for an eternity. I was weak. I was pale. I felt incredibly small. I reached for my phone. My hand trembled slightly. It was not from emotion, not yet. It was just the sheer physical exhaustion of moving my arm. I saw the name on the screen. Mason. He was my older brother. A small wave of relief washed over my tired body. Finally, someone from my family was checking on me. I had texted him, his wife Chloe, and my parents before the surgery. I texted them all again when I got out of the hospital. I received a generic thumbs-up emoji from Chloe. Radio silence from Mason and my parents. But now my brother was calling. I thought he actually cared. I cleared my dry throat. "Hey!" I croaked. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "I am back home. It has been really rough, but I am making it through. Joshua, listen, I do not have a lot of time." Mason's voice cut through the line. It was crisp. It was energetic. It was completely devoid of any concern for my health. He sounded like he was walking briskly. The background noise of a busy street filtered through the speaker. "Chloe and I are finalizing the Christmas Eve dinner list. We have the caterers coming in an hour for a consultation." I blinked. The painkillers made my brain slow to process the shift in his tone. "Oh, okay. Well, I am not sure what I can bring this year since I cannot really cook yet, but I already ordered those vintage wines Chloe likes for the gift exchange." There was a pause. It was a heavy, pregnant silence that felt sharper than the surgical incision in my abdomen. "Yeah, about that," Mason said. I could actually hear the grimace in his voice. It was the fake sympathy he always used when he was about to do something entirely selfish. "We are making some changes to the guest list this year. It is going to be a different vibe. Very high-end. Chloe invited a major VIP to the party, and I have 2 potential investors coming. I need this promotion, Joshua. You know that." "That sounds intense," I whispered. I shifted my legs and winced at the hard pull in my side. "But I can just sit quietly in the corner. I will not be in the way. I really just need to be around family right now." "Mason, being alone in this house while recovering has been incredibly hard." "Joshua, look." He sighed. It was an impatient sound. He was treating me like a difficult child. "You are not listening to me. This is not a family potluck. This is a networking event disguised as Christmas. Appearance is absolutely everything." I held my breath. "And frankly," Mason continued, his voice taking on a lecturing tone, "looking at how you have been lately, you just do not fit the aesthetic. You work from home. You live in sweatpants. You drive a beat-up Honda. You are comfortable being average. But these people coming to my house, they are sharks. They are winners. Mom and Dad agree with me on this." My chest tightened. "Mom and Dad agree with what?" I heard my mother's voice faintly in the background on his end. "Tell him we will send him a plate next week," she called out. "Chloe is really stressed about making a good impression." Mason pushed on, ignoring my question. "Having her brother-in-law sitting there looking like a sick ghost who has not brushed his hair in a week is not the image we are projecting. It is no place for losers, Joshua. You would just embarrass yourself. And you would embarrass us." The room seemed to tilt. The physical pain in my stomach was suddenly eclipsed by a cold, hollow ache expanding in my chest. "You are uninviting me?" I asked. My voice was barely audible. "From our family Christmas. Because I had surgery and I do not wear luxury brands. I am uninviting you because you bring the energy down," he snapped. He lost his polite veneer completely. "We are trying to level up in life. You are stagnant. Just stay home. Rest. Pop your pills. We will send you some leftovers if there are any. I have to go. The caterer is here." The line went dead. I stared at the black screen of my phone. I saw my own reflection. I looked like a pale, tired man with dark circles under his eyes. He was right about one thing. I looked wrecked, but his words echoed in my ears, bouncing around the empty walls of my fully paid-off house. No place for losers. I dropped the phone onto the carpet. I closed my eyes. Hot tears leaked out despite my absolute best efforts to stop them. It was not just the rejection. It was the audacity, the sheer, blinding ignorance of his words. The betrayal felt worse than the physical trauma of my surgery. For the first hour, I just laid there in the quiet. I grieved the brother I thought I had. I grieved the parents I thought loved me unconditionally. I let the silence of the empty house wrap around my shoulders. I felt the deep isolation settle into my bones. But as the painkillers kicked in and the initial shock began to recede, a completely different emotion started to take root. Started deep in my chest. A low, simmering heat that had absolutely nothing to do with a post-surgical fever. I pulled myself up. I winced at the sharp pain, but I forced my feet onto the floor. I shuffled to the kitchen to make a fresh cup of tea. Every single step was a harsh reminder of my physical weakness. But that weakness only served to highlight the extreme cruelty of what Mason and my parents had just done. They knew I was alone. They knew I was in severe pain. And they kicked me while I was down simply because I did not fit their fake aesthetic. I sat at my kitchen island. I clutched the warm ceramic mug. I unlocked my phone again. I navigated to my banking app. Mason called me a loser. He called me stagnant. He said I did not fit in with winners. I looked down at my attire. Oversized gray sweatpants and a stained hoodie. To the outside world, to Mason, Chloe, and my parents, I probably looked like a man who had completely given up on life. But they were looking at the wrong things. A cold smile touched my lips. It was the smile of a demolition expert looking at a condemned building. Mason wanted a Christmas only for winners. Fine. I would give him exactly that. But he had forgotten one crucial, undeniable fact about life. Winners pay their own bills. To truly understand why this betrayal cut me to the absolute bone, you have to understand the history of our family. Mason is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the undisputed golden child. He was the high school quarterback. He was the prom king. He was the guy with the charismatic smile that could charm a strict teacher into changing a failing grade. I was the quiet one. I was the bookworm sitting in the corner of the library. My parents, Robert and Martha, absolutely adored Mason. Frankly, so did I when we were younger. He had a magnetic pull. But as we grew older, the division in our house became a massive canyon. When it came time for university, my parents drained the entire college fund to send Mason to an expensive private out-of-state school. They told me I needed to take out loans and go to the local community college because they simply could not afford both. I worked night shifts at a diner to pay for my books while Mason joined a fraternity. But the real world does not care about your high school trophies. I graduated. I worked incredibly hard. I built a massive reputation in the publishing industry. I became a ghostwriter. I am the guy you call when a tech CEO or a famous politician has a brilliant idea for a memoir but absolutely zero writing ability. My salary is astronomical. My clients are billionaires. My waiting list is currently 8 months long. But my lifestyle is completely invisible. I bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. I maxed out my retirement accounts. I invested heavily. I drive a reliable Honda because I do not care about impressing strangers at a red light. Mason took a different path. He burned through opportunities. He invested in a luxury lifestyle brand that sold overpriced watches. Failed miserably. Then he tried to launch a tech incubator without knowing a single line of code. That failed too. He married Chloe, a woman who grew up with money and had no intention of ever living without it. Together, they bought a massive, sprawling house they could not afford. Mason always insisted that perception is reality. 3 years ago, his fake reality came crashing down hard. I remember the night perfectly. It was pouring rain. Mason showed up at my front door. He was soaked to the bone. His eyes were red and swollen. He sat at my kitchen island, right where I was sitting now, and he sobbed. He told me everything. The credit cards were completely maxed out. The massive mortgage was 3 months behind. Chloe was threatening to pack up their 2 kids, Rowan and Mia, and leave him forever. "I cannot lose them, Joshua," he cried, gripping my arm. "I just need time. I have a new project. It is going to be huge. I just need a runway. Please, you are my brother. You are the only one I can trust." I could not say no. I could not let my nephew Rowan, who was 7 at the time, and my niece Mia, who was 5, lose the only home they knew. I loved those kids more than anything, so I made a private deal with him. I would cover the absolute essentials to keep his family afloat. But I refused to put cash directly into his bank account. I knew it would just disappear into his absurd business expenses. I set up recurring automatic transfers from my accounts. I paid $3,200 every single month directly to St. Jude's Preparatory Academy for the kids' tuition. I paid $1,000 every month directly to the dealership for Chloe's luxury Porsche SUV lease. I even started sending $800 a month directly to my parents, Robert and Martha, because Mason had promised to support them in their retirement and suddenly could not. In exchange, Mason promised to get a real, stable job, fix his finances, and pay me back every single dime. He never got a real job. He just consulted. And he never paid me back a single cent. Instead, over the last year, their behavior shifted. The gratitude vanished. Entitlement took its place. They stopped saying thank you. They stopped inviting me over unless they needed a free babysitter. At Thanksgiving, my parents would sit at the table and praise Mason for his entrepreneurial spirit. Then my father, Robert, would look at me and ask when I was going to get a real career instead of just typing little stories on my laptop. I bit my tongue. I always bit my tongue to keep the peace. But sitting in my kitchen, recovering from surgery, the memory of that phone call burned in my mind. No place for losers. I picked up my iPad from the counter. It was synced to my phone. Sometimes old text messages loaded slowly on it. As I opened the screen, a new message thread popped up. It was a group chat with Mason, my mother, and my father. I was not in the chat, but because my mother still used the old family iCloud account I set up for her years ago, her messages occasionally synced to my devices if she forgot to disconnect. I scrolled up. My blood turned to absolute ice. It was a conversation from yesterday. Mason: "Chloe is freaking out about Joshua coming. Julian is confirmed for the party. If Julian sees Joshua looking like a homeless guy, it ruins the whole image. Martha: Mom, I told you not to invite him in the first place. He has no sense of pride in his appearance. It is embarrassing. You need this promotion, Mason. Do not let your brother ruin your chances. Robert: Dad, just tell him the guest list is full. He never leaves his house anyway. He will survive. Mason: I will call him today and cut him loose. I will just tell him he does not fit the aesthetic." I stared at the glowing screen. The words blurred together. My own parents. The people I was sending $800 a month to just so they could live comfortably. They were the ones who pushed the knife into my back. They conspired to exclude me because I did not look expensive enough for their fake friends. They gladly took my money to fund their groceries and their golf club memberships, but they were ashamed to have me stand in the same room as them. The physical pain in my abdomen was completely gone. Pure, cold clarity replaced it. I opened my banking app. I scrolled past my checking account. I scrolled past my massive investment portfolio. I tapped on the tab labeled Scheduled Transfers. There they were. The lifelines. Transfer 1. St. Jude's tuition. $3,200. Transfer 2. Porsche Financial Services. $1,000. Transfer 3. Robert and Martha Support Fund. $800. I took a deep, steadying breath. I tapped the first transfer. A prompt appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" I tapped yes. I moved to the Porsche lease. Cancel. I moved to my parents' allowance. Cancel. In less than 60 seconds, I wiped out $5,000 of monthly income from their lives. The bank of Joshua was officially closed. I set my phone face down on the counter. The silence in the house felt entirely different now. It was not lonely anymore. It was powerful. I was finally awake. 3 days passed. The silence from my family was absolute. They were too busy hanging expensive ornaments on their towering tree to check on the brother they had just discarded. I spent those 3 days resting, drinking fluids, and letting my body heal. I also spent it compiling a very detailed, very aggressive spreadsheet. On the morning of the 4th day, my phone vibrated on the coffee table. It was 10:15 a.m. The caller ID flashed Mason's name. I let it ring. It stopped. Then it immediately started ringing again. He was desperate. I picked it up on the 3rd ring and pressed it to my ear. I did not say a word. "What did you do?" Mason screamed into the phone. He sounded like a cornered animal. "Joshua, answer me right now. What the hell did you do?" "Hello to you too, Mason," I said. My voice was calm, flat, and perfectly controlled. "My recovery is going well. Thanks for asking." "Do not play games with me," he yelled. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. He was panicking. "The school administrator just called me. She said the tuition payment bounced. She said the primary cardholder completely removed their authorization. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Did your bank flag it for fraud? You need to call them and fix this right now." I took a sip of my water. "No, Mason. The bank did not flag it. I canceled it." The silence on the line was so heavy it felt tangible. When he finally spoke, his voice was a frantic whisper. "You what? Why would you do that today?" "Because," I said, leaning back into my sofa, "I am a loser. Remember? You told me 3 days ago. There is no place for losers at your house. Losers do not pay for elite private schools, Mason. Winners do. And since you are such a massive winner with your high-end friends and your luxury Christmas party, I figured you did not need my stagnant money pulling your energy down anymore." "You petty, vindictive little," he sputtered, struggling to find words. "You are punishing my children because your feelings got hurt? You are a monster." "I am not punishing anyone," I corrected him sharply. "I am simply stepping back into reality. You cannot treat me like an embarrassing stain in private and then use my bank account to fund your fake life in public. You are cut off, Mason. Permanently." "It is $3,000, Joshua," he shouted. "I do not have that kind of liquid cash sitting around right now. I am putting everything into the new business launch." "Then maybe you should ask your wealthy VIP guests to spot you," I replied. "Good luck." I hung up the phone. I blocked his number. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my father, Robert. I answered it, curious to see what angle he would play. "Joshua," my father barked. His voice held that deep, authoritarian tone he used when I was a teenager breaking curfew. "Your brother just called me in tears. Turn those payments back on immediately. I will not have you throwing a temper tantrum and ruining this family's reputation." "I am not throwing a tantrum, Dad," I said smoothly. "I am just tightening my budget. By the way, your $800 allowance is canceled too. You and Mom will have to pay for your own golf fees from now on." I heard my mother, Martha, snatch the phone. "Joshua David, how dare you speak to your father that way? We raised you. We gave you everything. If you do not fix this right now, your father will write you out of the inheritance." I actually laughed out loud. It hurt my stitches, but I could not stop. "What inheritance, Mom? The house that has a second mortgage on it? The savings account you drained to send Mason to a frat house? You have nothing to leave me. I am the one leaving you money every month." "Not anymore." I saw the text messages on the iPad. "Mom, I know you told him to uninvite me." Martha gasped. The line went dead quiet. She knew she was caught. "Have a wonderful Christmas," I said, and ended the call. I blocked their numbers too. Later that afternoon, my curiosity got the better of me. I unblocked Mason for just a moment to see if he would leave a voicemail. He had left 4. I listened to the last one. Joshua, please. Mason was crying on the audio. The school said Rowan cannot return after the winter break if the tuition is not paid. And they said there is an outstanding balance for the ski trip. I need that money. Chloe is going to leave me. I frowned. I called the admissions office at St. Jude's myself. I spoke to Mrs. Hayes, the billing administrator. Hi, this is Joshua. I used to handle the payments for Rowan and Mia. Can you clarify the outstanding balance for the ski trip? Oh, yes, Mrs. Hayes said politely. The $2,500 fee for the winter ski excursion. It was due 3 weeks ago. My jaw tightened. Mason had explicitly told me 2 months ago that his consulting bonus had covered the ski trip. He bragged about it at a family dinner. I asked Mrs. Hayes to email me a copy of the invoice history. When I looked at the dates, it hit me. He took the money he claimed was for the ski trip and bought the custom velvet tuxedo jacket he had been bragging about wearing to his VIP Christmas party. He stole from his own son's experience to buy a costume for himself. My phone rang again. It was Uncle Aaron, my father's brother. I sighed and answered. Joshua, what is wrong with you? Aaron demanded immediately. Your mother is having a panic attack. Mason says you lost your mind on painkillers and are trying to leave his kids out on the street. You need to apologize and wire him the money. Family is family. Aaron, I said coldly, did Mason tell you I have paid over $100,000 of his bills over the last 3 years while he plays pretend CEO? Aaron hesitated. He said you helped out a little, but I pay his rent. I pay his car. I pay his kids' school. And 3 days ago, he uninvited me to Christmas because my clothes are not expensive enough. Do not ever call my phone again to defend a parasite. I hung up. I went into my phone settings and set my phone to reject all unknown numbers. The storm had officially made landfall, and I was standing safely on high ground watching their sandcastle wash away. The next morning, the real panic set in for Mason and Chloe. I woke up to a high-priority alert on my phone. It was an automated text message from my credit card company. Fraud alert. Did you attempt a charge of $5,000 at Cartier on card ending in 4492? Reply yes or no. My blood ran completely cold. The card ending in 4492 was my emergency platinum card. I had given the physical card to Mason 2 years ago when his car broke down on the side of the highway in another state. I told him to use it for the tow truck and keep it locked in his safe for absolute life-or-death emergencies. I had honestly forgotten he even had it. He was trying to buy jewelry, or maybe an expensive watch. He was trying to buy a luxury gift to hand to Julian, the VIP guest, to secure his fake promotion. He was willing to steal $5,000 from the brother he just banished to maintain his illusion. I replied no. My phone rang immediately. It was the bank's fraud department. Hello, this is Joshua, I said, my voice shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. Mr. Joshua, we blocked a suspicious transaction. The card was keyed in manually online. Would you like to authorize this? Absolutely not, I stated firmly. That card is stolen. Cancel it immediately. Issue a new one with a different number. And put a hard lock on my account against any manual entries without a vocal passcode. Consider it done, sir, the agent replied. I ended the call and threw my phone onto the couch. The absolute audacity of it all. Mason was not just a pathetic snob. He was a thief. Any lingering shred of guilt I felt about cutting off the kids' tuition vanished entirely. I could not fund a criminal. I needed to protect myself, and I needed to strike back in a way that he could not ignore. I picked up the phone and called Samuel. Samuel was my best friend from college and, conveniently, a ruthless corporate lawyer. Joshua, how is the appendix? Samuel answered cheerfully. The appendix is gone, but the parasite is still attached, I said. Samuel, I need you to draft a formal legal document right now. I need a demand letter. Who are we suing? Samuel asked. I could hear him sitting up in his chair, his lawyer instincts kicking in. My brother. Over the last 3 years, I have paid exactly $150,000 to keep him and his wife afloat. I have the bank statements. I have text messages from 3 years ago where he explicitly promises to pay me back when he gets on his feet. He just tried to fraudulently charge $5,000 to my emergency credit card. I am done playing nice. Samuel let out a low whistle. $150,000. Joshua, without a signed promissory note, recovering that in court is a coin toss. But if you have text messages acknowledging the debt, we can absolutely terrify him. A formal demand letter on my firm's letterhead will freeze him. If he tries to sell his house or declare bankruptcy, this establishes you as a primary creditor. Do it, I commanded. I do not even care if I get the money back. I want him to see the exact price of his arrogance on paper. I want the letter drafted, sealed, and delivered by a legal courier. And Samuel? Yeah. I want the courier to hand it to him on Christmas Eve, right in the middle of his fancy networking party. Samuel chuckled darkly. You are a savage, Joshua. I love it. Send me the spreadsheets and the screenshots of the texts. I will have it ready. While Samuel worked his legal magic, I sat at my laptop and did some digging of my own. I logged into my secondary Facebook account, the one I used to keep up with local neighborhood news. I navigated to the gated community group where Mason and Chloe lived. Sure enough, near the top of the feed was a post from Chloe, uploaded just 3 hours ago. Urgent. Lease takeover. 2023 Porsche SUV. Immaculate condition. We are upgrading to a larger vehicle for our growing family and need someone to take over this amazing lease immediately. DM for details. We'll cover the first month. I smiled a cold, hard smile. Growing family. What a pathetic lie. The reality was that the lease payment was due in 5 days. And without my money, she was staring down the barrel of a repossession. She was desperately scrambling to offload the car onto some unsuspecting neighbor before the repo man showed up to tow it away. She was terrified of the ultimate social humiliation. The divorce she constantly threatened Mason with was probably looming right over his head. The walls were rapidly closing in on them. I closed the laptop. I walked over to the window and looked out at the snow falling softly on my driveway. Mason wanted a high-end Christmas. He wanted a party filled with sharks and winners. I was going to make sure he got exactly the kind of high-stakes corporate environment he begged for. Christmas Eve arrived with a bitter, biting chill. The wind howled outside, freezing the snow into hard sheets of ice on the roads. I sat parked in my reliable Honda, a block away from Mason's massive, over-mortgaged house. I had the heater blasting. I was not there to attend the party. I had 2 small presents sitting on the passenger seat. They were wrapped in simple brown paper. One was a specialized coding kit for Rowan. The other was a high-end art supply set for Mia. Regardless of the war between adults, I refused to let my brother's toxic ego rob those kids of a relationship with their uncle. My plan was simple. Walk up, leave the gifts on the porch, text Mason they were there, and drive away before anyone saw me. Through the windshield, I watched a sleek black town car pull into Mason's driveway. A woman in a stunning emerald evening coat stepped out. Following right behind her was a silver Tesla. 2 men in sharp, custom-tailored suits exited. These must be the investors, David and Luke. The house itself was glowing. Every single window was ablaze with warm, golden light. I could see the silhouettes of people moving inside, holding crystal wine glasses, laughing. It looked like a scene from a luxury magazine. It looked like a complete, utter lie. I took a deep breath. I grabbed the gifts and stepped out into the freezing air. I was wearing dark jeans, a thick wool sweater, and a heavy winter coat. I looked completely normal. I did not look like a VIP. My boots crunched loudly on the frozen pavement as I walked up the driveway. I noticed Chloe's Porsche was parked off to the side, half in the grass, hidden behind a large oak tree. She was trying to keep it out of sight. I reached the large wooden front door. Before I could even raise my hand to knock, the door swung open violently. Mason stood there, He was wearing the custom velvet tuxedo jacket he bought with his son's ski trip money. His face instantly drained of all color the second his eyes locked onto mine. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. He stepped outside quickly and pulled the heavy door partially shut behind him, physically blocking the view of the party inside. "I am just dropping off gifts for Rowan and Mia," I said. My voice was remarkably steady, despite the adrenaline hammering in my chest. "I am not staying, Mason. Just take the boxes." I shoved the presents toward his chest. Before he could grab them, the door pulled open wider. My mother, Martha, stood there holding a tray of expensive appetizers. She gasped, nearly dropping the tray. "Joshua, you cannot be here. You are going to ruin everything." "Who is at the door, Mason?" A confident, commanding voice called out from the foyer. It was a man. He stepped into the doorway, standing right behind my mother. He was older, distinguished, holding a glass of scotch. This was Julian, the VIP. The man Mason was desperately trying to impress for a promotion. Mason panicked. Sweat actually beaded on his forehead in the freezing cold. He forced a tight, agonizingly fake smile. "Oh, Julian, it is just my younger brother, Joshua. He is going through a really rough patch right now. Unemployed, struggling. We try to give him charity when we can. He was just leaving." Mason reached out and gripped my arm tightly, his nails digging through my coat. "Leave," he whispered viciously. Julian stepped past my mother. He squinted at me in the dim porch light. He stepped closer. His eyes widened. "Joshua?" Julian asked. His commanding tone suddenly completely vanished, replaced by absolute shock. "Joshua, as in Joshua the ghostwriter? The one who structured the Horizon memoir for the Tech Summit last month." The entire porch went dead silent. Mason froze. My mother's mouth fell open. "Yes," I said quietly. I pulled my arm out of Mason's grip. "Hello, Julian. It is good to see you in person." Julian let out a loud, booming laugh. He reached out and grabbed my hand, shaking it vigorously. "I cannot believe this. Mason, you never told me your brother is the most sought-after writer on the West Coast. My firm has been on his waiting list for 8 months trying to secure a contract. He costs an absolute fortune." Mason looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stammered, looking back and forth between us. "Wait. What? No, Julian. Joshua just writes little blog posts from his couch." "Blog posts?" Julian laughed again, looking at Mason like he was an idiot. "Mason, your brother's last contract was worth more than your entire department's annual budget. Joshua, please, come inside. We need to talk business." "No, I do not think he should," my mother started to say, her face turning purple. "Actually, Julian," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the open door into the quiet living room behind them. "I cannot stay. I do not fit the aesthetic of this party. Mason and my parents made it very clear 3 days ago that this is no place for losers. And apparently, I am a loser." Julian's smile completely vanished. He looked at Mason, his eyes narrowing sharply. "You called him a loser?" I reached inside my heavy coat. I did not pull out the gifts. I pulled out a thick, sealed legal envelope from Samuel's law firm. I stepped past Mason and slapped the envelope down onto the marble entryway table, right next to the tray of appetizers. "That is a formal legal demand for the repayment of the $150,000 I have loaned you to keep you out of bankruptcy over the last 3 years," I announced loudly. Several guests in the living room, including the 2 investors, turned their heads to stare. "You are lying," Mason screamed. His fake persona shattered completely. He lunged forward. "Including the $3,200 a month I pay for your kids' tuition and the lease on Chloe's Porsche," I continued smoothly, stepping back. "Which reminds me." Suddenly, the front yard was bathed in intensely bright, pulsing orange and yellow light. We all turned our heads toward the driveway. A massive, heavy-duty tow truck had just backed aggressively onto the property. The flashing strobe lights reflected off the pristine white snow, casting a chaotic, disco-like glow over the front of the house. A large man in a high-visibility jacket hopped out of the cab. He held a metal clipboard. He walked straight up the driveway, ignoring the luxury cars, and marched right up to the porch. "Looking for a Chloe," the repo man shouted over the low hum of his diesel engine. He looked at my mother, then at Mason. "Order for immediate repossession on a 2023 Porsche SUV. The account is severely delinquent. You can hand me the keys, or I can drag it onto the flatbed with the hook. Your choice, buddy." The silence that followed was absolute. It was suffocating. Inside the house, I heard the sharp shatter of glass. Chloe had dropped her wine glass onto the hardwood floor. Julian looked at the repo man. He looked at the legal envelope on the table. He looked at Mason's terrified, sweating face. Julian set his Scotch glass down slowly next to the envelope. "I think I have seen enough," Julian said coldly. He turned his back on Mason and walked toward the coat closet. The two investors, David and Luke, stepped forward into the foyer. David, the taller one, shook his head in disgust. "Wait, David, please," Mason begged, stepping toward him. "It is a misunderstanding, a banking error. My brother is just jealous. He set this up to ruin me." David looked at Mason with absolute contempt. "The only error here, Mason, was you assuming we would not do our due diligence before coming here. We knew your tech incubator company was a fraud. We knew your LLC status was inactive. We only came tonight to see if you would have the integrity to be honest with us. Clearly, you are nothing but a con artist." The investors buttoned their coats. They walked right past Mason. They walked down the porch steps, stepping right past the repo man, who was currently attaching heavy steel chains to the front axle of Chloe's precious Porsche. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me like the video and comment number 1 below, so I know you have been with me up to this point. This not only helps more people find this story, but it also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. I stood there on the porch. The cold wind whipped around us, but I had never felt warmer. The entire illusion was shattered into a million unfixable pieces. The heavy diesel engine of the tow truck roared to life. With a loud metallic clank, the front tires of the Porsche were hoisted off the frozen grass. The repo man did not wait for the keys. He secured the chains, climbed back into his cab, and slowly drove away. The flashing orange lights faded down the dark street, taking the last symbol of Mason's fake wealth with it. The porch was eerily quiet now, except for the whistling wind. The high society guests inside the house were hastily grabbing their coats and slipping out the back door, desperate to escape the toxic awkwardness of the scene. I looked at my family. My mother, Martha, was trembling. Her hands gripped the empty appetizer tray so hard her knuckles were white. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a frantic mix of fear and realization. "Joshua," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Joshua, honey, please, let's go inside. We can talk about this. We are a family. You cannot just leave us like this." "We are not a family, Mom," I said quietly. The anger was gone. Only a deep, profound emptiness remained. "I am just a wallet to you. I always have been. Now you will have to find a new one." My father, Robert, stood frozen in the doorway. He did not yell. He did not threaten to cut me out of the inheritance. He just stared at the marble table where the legal demand letter sat. He finally realized that the son he had spent a lifetime treating like a disappointment was the only reason he had been able to play golf every weekend. He looked old. He looked defeated. And Mason was leaning against the doorframe. The custom velvet jacket looked ridiculous on him now, like a cheap Halloween costume on a tired man. Tears were streaming freely down his cheeks. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving. "You ruined it," Mason whispered, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You ruined my entire life. Chloe is going to take the kids. I am going to lose the house. You did this to me." "No, Mason," I said, buttoning my coat tight against the chill. I did not ruin anything. I just stopped paying for the stage props. You ruined your own life the second you decided you were too good for the truth. I turned my back on them. I walked down the driveway. I did not look back when I heard Chloe start screaming hysterically from inside the house. I did not stop when my mother called my name one last time. I opened the door to my reliable 10-year-old Honda. I slid into the driver's seat. I turned the key, and the engine purred to life instantly. The heater blasted warm air onto my face. As I drove away from the neighborhood, watching the massive, dark houses roll past my windows, a strange physical sensation washed over me. The heavy, suffocating weight that had been sitting on my chest for 3 years, the constant anxiety of secretly managing their debts, the bitter resentment of being used, the desperate need for their validation, was completely gone. I could breathe. For the first time in my adult life, my lungs expanded fully. I drove back to my modest, fully paid-off home. The house was quiet, but it did not feel lonely. It felt safe. It felt like a fortress that I had built with my own 2 hands. I walked into the kitchen. I made myself a large mug of hot chocolate. I sat down on the sofa, mindful of my healing surgical stitches. I turned on a classic Christmas movie. I did not check my phone. I did not care about the barrage of panic text messages and missed calls I knew were piling up on my blocked list. I spent that Christmas Eve entirely alone. And as I sat there, sipping my hot chocolate and watching the snow fall outside my window, I realized it was the most peaceful, perfect holiday I had ever experienced. The storm was finally over, and the sky was clear. The first few weeks of January were brutally cold, both in the weather outside and in the absolute silence that settled over my life. When you finally cut off a toxic family, people expect it to be this massive, cinematic explosion that lasts for months. But the reality is very different. The reality is just quiet. It is the sudden absence of drama. It is waking up on a Tuesday morning and realizing your phone is not buzzing with a manufactured crisis. It is checking your bank account and seeing your hard-earned money staying exactly where it belongs. But while my world had grown incredibly peaceful, Mason's world was actively burning to the ground. I got the play-by-play of the destruction mostly from Samuel, my lawyer. Samuel had officially filed the paperwork to attach a legal lien to Mason's massive house based on the demand letter and the documented history of my loans. Mason tried to fight it, of course. He actually hired a cheap defense attorney to claim the $150,000 was a gift. But Samuel is a shark. He presented the judge with the 3-year history of text messages, the bank transfer receipts, and the audio voicemails of Mason explicitly begging for time to repay the debt. The judge did not even hesitate. The lien was granted. That was the final nail in the coffin for Mason's fake empire. Without my monthly cash injections to keep the mortgage afloat, the bank came knocking. They were already 3 months behind. They had no choice but to put the house on the market immediately to avoid a total foreclosure. I remember sitting at my kitchen island one evening in late January, sipping a cup of black coffee, and looking up their house on Zillow. It was surreal. The grand, sprawling estate that Mason had used to make me feel like a pathetic loser was now listed for a desperate fire sale. The photos showed the pristine living room where I had dropped that legal envelope on Christmas Eve. But now the rooms looked empty. The staging was gone. The fake warmth was completely stripped away. The neighborhood gossip mill worked faster than the real estate market. In an affluent gated community, nothing stays a secret for long. Everyone saw the Repo man drag Chloe's Porsche down the street on Christmas Eve. Everyone heard the rumors that the wealthy investors had walked out of the holiday party in absolute disgust. My parents, Robert and Martha, caught the worst of the social fallout. For years, they had paraded around their country club, bragging about their successful entrepreneur son, while conveniently hiding the fact that their quiet younger son was actually funding their entire lifestyle. Without my $800 monthly transfer, their reality fractured. They could not afford the expensive club dues anymore. They could not afford the weekly golf outings or the lavish dinners they used to buy to impress their friends. My mother actually tried to call me one last time in February. I had unblocked her number temporarily to send her a medical update from my surgeon. She called me within 5 minutes. I answered, foolishly hoping that the loss of her social standing might have brought some clarity or remorse. I was wrong. "Joshua," she said. Her voice was thin, reedy, and vibrating with indignation. "I hope you are happy. You have completely destroyed this family. Your father had to cancel his country club membership today. He is humiliated. Our friends are asking questions we cannot answer. You owe us an apology, and you need to call Samuel and drop that ridiculous lien on your brother's house." I sat in my quiet living room and just listened to her breathe heavily into the receiver. "Mom," I said. My voice was completely steady. "You and Dad drained my college fund to send Mason to a fraternity. You let me work night shifts at a diner to pay for my own textbooks. You sat in a group chat and conspired to banish me from a family holiday because my clothes were not expensive enough for you. You never loved me. You only loved what I could provide for you." "That is not true," she cried out. "We are your parents. And I was your ATM," I replied. "The bank is permanently closed. I suggest you and Dad look into downsizing your house. I am officially done." I hung up the phone and blocked her number forever. It felt incredibly heavy, like attending a funeral for people who were still walking around. I was mourning the parents I deserved but never actually had. But beneath the grief, there was a profound sense of liberation. My peace of mind was my true inheritance, and I was finally claiming it. By March, the inevitable happened to Mason's marriage. Chloe was a woman who married for status and luxury. When the status evaporated and the luxury was repossessed, her vows meant absolutely nothing. She packed up her expensive bags, put the kids in her remaining car, and drove back to her parents' massive estate in Connecticut. She filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Samuel told me the details over a beer one Friday night. Chloe's family hired a team of ruthless corporate lawyers. They went after Mason for everything he did not have. The custody battle over Rowan and Mia was swift and brutal. Mason had no stable income, a failing LLC, and a mountain of debt. Chloe secured primary physical custody. Mason was granted every other weekend and shared holidays. Mason was forced to move out of the massive house. It finally sold in late March, but because of the dipping market, the real estate fees, the overdue mortgage penalties, and the lien Samuel had brilliantly placed, Mason walked away from the closing table with practically nothing. He used what little cash he got to pay back a fraction of what he owed me, satisfying the legal requirement. He moved into a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of the city. He needed a place cheap enough to afford on a basic salary, but big enough to legally host his kids on his alternating weekends. The CEO of Prestige Global Holdings had to get a real job. He had no choice. The court mandated a verifiable income for his child support calculations. With no actual hard skills, no coding knowledge, and a completely ruined reputation in the local tech community, Mason had to take whatever he could find. He ended up taking a mid-level sales position at a commercial HVAC company. He sold air conditioning units to office parks. His base salary was less than what Chloe used to spend on designer handbags in a single quarter. He had a boss. He had quotas. He had to clock in at 8 in the morning and wear a cheap polyester polo shirt with the company logo embroidered on the chest. While Mason was forced to swallow his pride and learn what honest, grueling work actually felt like, my life took a completely different trajectory. I used the pain, the anger, and the ultimate freedom of those 3 months to fuel my own ambitions. For years, I had hidden in the shadows as a ghostwriter, making other people look brilliant. But the encounter with Julian at the Christmas party had sparked something inside me. Julian's absolute reverence for my talent made me realize I did not need to hide anymore. I took a massive leap of faith. I turned down 3 highly lucrative ghostwriting contracts. Instead, I gave myself a promotion. I sat down at my laptop and I wrote my own book. It was a sharp, insightful, and deeply personal exploration of corporate culture, toxic ambition, and the psychology of fake wealth. I poured every ounce of my experience with Mason into those pages. I used my industry connections to pitch it to a major publishing house. Because they already knew my secret track record of producing bestsellers for billionaires, they bought the manuscript within a week. The advance they paid me was staggering. But more importantly, when the book was scheduled for release, my real name was going to be printed in bold letters right on the front cover. I was fully healed physically. My surgical scars had faded into thin white lines. I was working out again. I was eating well. I was sleeping 8 uninterrupted hours a night. I had built a life of absolute integrity, and it felt incredible. Then, in mid-April, the real test arrived. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing the final galley proofs for my book, when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to look. "Hi, Uncle Joshua. It's Rowan. This is my mom's old phone she let me keep. I have a soccer game this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the public park near my dad's new apartment. Can you come?" I stared at the screen. My heart did a painful, heavy flip in my chest. Rowan was 10 years old. Mia was 8. I had not seen them or spoken to them since I dropped those presents on the porch in the freezing cold on Christmas Eve. I knew they were caught in the crossfire of the divorce. I knew their entire world had been flipped upside down. They lost their massive house. They lost their elite private school. They lost the only reality they had ever known. I typed back immediately. "I will be there, buddy. I promise." Saturday morning arrived with a bright, clear blue sky and a crisp spring breeze. I drove my 10-year-old Honda across town to the public park. It was a stark contrast to the perfectly manicured, heated athletic fields at St. Jude's Preparatory Academy. This field was patchy. The grass was overgrown in the corners. The parking lot was full of minivans and old sedans, not Teslas and Range Rovers. I parked my car and walked toward the chain-link fence surrounding the field. I spotted Rowan instantly. He was running down the sideline, chasing the soccer ball. He was wearing a simple, slightly oversized blue jersey. He looked scruffier than I remembered. His hair was a little longer, a little messier. But as he kicked the ball and cheered with his teammates, I noticed something else. He looked lighter. The intense, high-pressure anxiety that Chloe and Mason used to force on him to perform perfectly was completely gone. He was just a kid playing a game in the mud. I stood by the bleachers and watched the entire game. When the referee blew the final whistle, Rowan turned and scanned the crowd. His eyes locked onto mine. His face lit up with a massive, genuine smile. "Uncle Joshua," he yelled. He sprinted across the muddy grass and threw his arms around my waist. He buried his sweaty face into my jacket. I hugged him back tightly, resting my chin on the top of his head. I did not care about the mud. I did not care about the dirt. I just held my nephew. "Hey, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You played a great game. You have gotten a lot faster." "Thanks," he beamed, pulling back. Just then, I felt a small tug on my sleeve. I looked down. It was Mia. She was holding the high-end art sketchbook I had left on the porch on Christmas Eve. It was filled with beautiful, colorful drawings. "Hi, Uncle Joshua," she said softly. "Hi, sweetie." I smiled, kneeling down to her level. "Those drawings are amazing. You have been practicing." She nodded proudly. I stood back up and looked at Rowan. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, looking up at me with that innocent, blunt curiosity that only a 10-year-old possesses. "Uncle Joshua," Rowan asked, tilting his head, "Dad told me you are really rich. Is that true?" "He said you have more money than the people who used to come to our old house." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. I crouched back down so I was eye level with both of them. "I am comfortable, Rowan," I said carefully. "I have enough because I work very hard, and I do not buy expensive things that I do not actually need. Wealth is not about what you wear or what you drive. It is about knowing you are safe, and knowing you can take care of yourself." "Dad says he is sorry," Mia piped up suddenly. She was not looking at me. She was looking down at her muddy sneakers. "He says he was really stupid to you. He told Mom that on the phone when they were yelling." I froze. I looked up over the kids' heads. Standing about 50 yards away, near the edge of the parking lot, was Mason. He was not wearing a velvet tuxedo. He was not wearing a custom-tailored suit. He was wearing a cheap, faded windbreaker and a pair of wrinkled khaki pants. He looked tired. He had gained a noticeable amount of weight around his midsection. His hair was thinning rapidly. The charismatic, arrogant golden boy was completely gone. The man standing by the fence was just a guy. An exhausted, deeply humbled guy working a brutal sales job to pay child support. He saw me looking at him. He stood up a little straighter. He hesitated for a long moment. Then, slowly, he raised his right hand in a small, tentative wave. He did not walk over. He did not try to force a conversation. He stayed exactly where he was, standing behind the chain-link fence. He was actively respecting the boundary I had set. He finally understood that he had lost the privilege of my company. I did not wave back. I did not smile. But I looked him directly in the eyes, and I gave him a single, firm nod. It was not forgiveness. I am not sure if I will ever fully forgive him for what he and my parents did to me. But it was an acknowledgement that the illusion was dead, the debt was settled, and he was finally living in the real world. I turned my attention back to my nephew and niece. "Do you guys want to go get some ice cream?" I asked, raising my eyebrows. "My treat." "Yes!" they screamed in perfect unison. "Go tell your dad," I instructed. "Tell him I will have you back here in exactly 30 minutes. Rowan sprinted over to the fence, spoke to Mason for a few seconds, and gave me a thumbs up. Mason looked at me one last time, nodded his head in quiet gratitude, and walked toward his own beat-up sedan to wait. I walked with Rowan and Mia toward the parking lot. The spring sun felt warm on my shoulders. We chatted about school, about Mia's new art projects, and about the video games Rowan was playing. It was simple. It was normal. It was everything a family is supposed to be, stripped of all the toxic expectations and the fake social climbing. We reached my car. My reliable, 10-year-old, fully paid-off Honda. Rowan climbed into the back seat without a single complaint. He did not care that there were no heated leather seats. He did not care that the logo on the steering wheel was not a luxury badge. He just cared that his uncle showed up to watch him play in the mud. As I closed the car door and walked around to the driver's side, I paused for a moment. I put my hand on the cold metal roof of the car and looked back toward the empty soccer field. I realized something incredibly important right then. Mason had been right about one thing on that terrible phone call back in December. That Christmas party was absolutely no place for losers. But standing here in the spring sunshine, holding the keys to my own life, knowing my mortgage was completely paid off, knowing my career was thriving, and knowing my conscience was perfectly clear, I knew exactly who the winner was. I was not the one who needed an audience of strangers to feel valuable. I was not the one who needed a luxury car to mask my insecurities. I was not the one who had to destroy my own family just to fit an aesthetic. I was Joshua. I was the ghostwriter who finally stepped into the light. For the first time in my entire life, I had stopped trying to fix everyone else's problems, and I had successfully fixed my own life first. I had cut the dead weight, established absolute boundaries, and protected my own peace. And that feeling, that profound, unshakable peace, that was the best aesthetic of all. Here is the truth about family, and the greatest lesson I learned from this entire nightmare. Blood makes you related, but loyalty, respect, and mutual care are what make you a family. Society conditions us to believe that we must endlessly tolerate abuse, financial exploitation, and blatant disrespect simply because the people hurting us share our DNA. We are told to keep the peace and be the bigger person. But keeping the peace with toxic people only guarantees that you will be constantly at war with yourself. I learned that establishing firm, unyielding boundaries is not an act of cruelty. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. When you cut off the resources of people who use you, you force them to face their own reality. You cannot save people who are committed to their own destructive illusions, whether they are your parents, your siblings, or your friends. True wealth is not found in the labels on your clothes or the cars in your driveway. True wealth is found in a quiet mind, a secure life, and the ability to walk away from anyone who makes you feel like you are hard to love. I would love to know your thoughts on this. What was your biggest takeaway from my story? Do you agree that sometimes cutting ties is the only way to win? Let me know your perspective in the comments, or simply type the word good if you agree with the lessons this journey taught me. Thank you for listening.